Ready.
All right, everybody, let's get this party started. It is Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. It is 6:30 p.m., and you are at a Common Council meeting of the City of Wausau. Welcome, everyone. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next up, the clerk will call the roll, or use the computer for it.
There are 11 voting members.
All right, thank you. Next up, public comment. Any pre-registered citizens for matters appearing on the agenda and other public comment? We do not have any. So next up, we have our consent agenda. That is file number 231101 through file number 231120. I would entertain a motion. If you want to use your little button. Anyone? All right, we have a motion by Elder Watson and a second by Elder Lukens. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing anybody.
You may vote. Passes 11-0.
All right, thank you. We do not have any mayor's appointments today. Next up is file number 231121. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee establishing the 2024 property tax equivalent for Wausau Waterworks, Wausau, Wisconsin. Looks like I have a motion by Elder Lukens and a second by Elder Herbst. Is there any discussion?
We do have the Ellers here.
And we have Ellers here, so maybe we'll have them give us a spiel. Hey, Brian, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, we are ready if you want to give us just an overview.
Sure.
Thank you.
So city staff had asked us to come on to the meeting, both at finance committee level and the council here tonight, to kind of review the property tax equivalent and how that impacts water rates. So I'll just remind everyone that the last time the pilot or payment in lieu of taxes was set, which is also labeled this property tax equivalent for the water utility, it was set at the 1.59 million number. That was what the Public Service Commission authorized for rate recovery in the recently completed rate case this year. So I believe on the table is to kind of keep it at this amount for now. So the one thing that I'll just add is changing that beyond that 1.5 number, 1.59 number. Understand any adjustment to the water rates could only be done through another conventional rate case. That process is time intensive, both from city staff and third-party individuals like ourselves. So that would come at additional costs, of course, to complete that and go back in the long-range cash flow for the water utility. Ellers did identify kind of looking at the rates again in approximately about 2 years. The reasoning for that is more or less not explicit to 2 years, but more explicit to the utility recognizing the expenses coming online for the granulated carbon system, which was the PFAS treatment, which this rate case was set to recover rates for. So kind of once seeing that full system come online, how the rates are performing against the system's new operational expenses, those assets being finalized and complete and booked, kind of seeing at that point where the rates could look like beyond that. So again, I'll just reiterate that changing the amount of the property tax equivalent would not change the rates in the immediate future up until you would go for another conventional rate case through the Public Service Commission.
All right, do we have any questions from our council? Yes, Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the big thumb question, and I had brought it up last time in anticipation of this information or presentation tonight by Ehlers. So could you just tell us very simply, and not asking for by the penny or anything like that, but a ballpark figure, if this was phased out, just what type of percentage point decrease we'd see in rates?
Sure. Not having the expense at all, it's basically 1.5 million of the total expenses that your rates were set to. So I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen, but I can try.
Yeah, it looks like it's
Looks
working.
like I am. So this is the rate order that's available publicly on the PSC's website. I can also forward the link to the city staff if anybody would find that easier to find this information. But the 1.5 million is built, in your current rates here, this at present rates and after the increases to identify kind of where your rates are now. Are they set to what the PSC wants? The NA basically means no, and then they set you to what their benchmark rate of return is, or their 6.2. So understand this kind of identifies a rate deficiency, and then making up those rates to get to their rate of return. That 1.59 million is made up within this. So the cost components that you're basically asked to recover is 8.3 million of operating expenses, and then this rate of return of just over 4 million to kind of get to your 12.4 of total revenues of the system. So you could remove the 1.59 million to kind of say what that impact is to kind of get there. This rate adjustment, according to the PSC, ultimately increase revenues by 64%. And so if you were to kind of remove that 1.59 million, I kind of calculated it near about 43% in terms of what that difference in that change would be. The one thing that I'd point out is there is a, counteraction as a result. This expense for the water utility is a revenue for the general fund. So I would exercise caution as it relates to decreasing this amount, because otherwise the general fund would need to make up those revenues somewhere else, whether that's, additional taxes or additional fees on some other level. So we could certainly explore phasing that out, and that would be kind of recommended, and we've kind of talked about that at Finance Committee, so I could, speak to that again, but hopefully that answers your question.
No, sir, it does not answer it at all. And for the sake of clarity and brevity, I'm looking for a number. So if this was phased out, could you tell the body and the public just very clearly and briefly how much the rates would go down, please?
You can't, so you could say what could have happened at the, at the time that these rates were set. The issue with doing it now, what it changes it to, I wouldn't be able to speak to, because in order to change the rates, you have to go to the PSC through this conventional rate case process, in which they would update, assets added at the point at which you go in. They would update what their current benchmark rate of return is, which is higher than 6.2% now, it's 6.8%. So in truth, there's other categories of your expenses would go up, removing it would go down. So I can only speak to, if it were removed from this.
That'll suffice, yes, from this.
Yeah, it would be about a 17% difference in the rate adjustment.
Okay, thank you. And then I've got just perhaps a couple more questions. Would I be characterizing it correctly that, by having this pilot, this payment from the utility, we're not alleviating pressure on the utility, we're actually causing it fiscally, correct? I mean, I just want to eliminate any confusion here with the body and the public that this helps the utility. Let me phrase it a different way. So this payment as revenue for the city, that's not generally going toward water, correct? It can go toward whatever the city wants to spend it on once it's been in receipt of that revenue, more or less.
Right, it's now revenue of it's an expense for the water utility, a revenue for the general fund. Therefore, at the discretion of the council, what that revenue of the general fund goes toward each year as part of your budgetary process.
Thank you. And so kind of in that vein, you had mentioned that maybe a counter reaction and talked about the interplay between this and the general fund. And I was sitting in the audience for the finance committee, and you talked about how other communities have done it, where if there's kind of net new construction and increasing kind of taxing capacity that way, that they offset the decrease in the pilot kind of in correlation with that net new construction kind of on an annual basis. That was, I think, something you threw out, but it appears that that's only one possible option. And I guess, isn't it correct that that counter reaction or having to have those offsets with the general fund, that's only under the working assumption that you're maintaining all those planned expenses? Isn't another option that you did not list that you could cut expenses as one option without needing to have the increase in taxing capacity? In general, I guess I'll make my question more simple. The same outcome could be achieved by reducing expenditures, correct? Not just instead of taking the money out of the right pocket of the taxpayer, taking it out of the left pocket. We could decrease expenses to offset costs theoretically.
Correct, yeah. So the item that I raised at the finance committee, suggesting, kind of marrying it to something within your taxing authority was correct, representing an understanding that, budgeted expenses don't go down. They're either remaining the same or going up. So that's why we've seen in communities them kind of create an annual procedure to reduce this pilot in a manner in which the general fund can handle it. Meaning, we'll go through the budget process. If you are cutting expenses, then that number could go up in terms of cutting the pilot payment under, that methodology. Correct.
Thank you. And my last question is, with your expertise and kind of your financial background, would you consider this kind of regressive in terms of this type of call it a revenue source? We can maybe casually call it taxation, but with water, doesn't that take, like for the same volume of the offering, a larger percentage of a lower income's family than it would take as a percentage of a higher income family, even if they were using the same volume of water? Would you consider it kind of regressive in that context? As opposed to, say, income tax or even property tax?
Sure. I can see where it could be thought of that way. The same could be said towards the budgetary functions within the interplay of, the governmental funds as well. Sometimes one of the governmental funds needs help and we're kind of shifting money that way. Can be repaid, it cannot be repaid, but so I wouldn't necessarily directly call it regressive. as a result of this is a function that's been at play. It's in play because of how the Public Service Commission regulates utilities, in that, they want the investor utilities to be on a similar playing field as the publicly owned utilities. I can see the argument, though, to understand, is this tax needed within the water utility? So I definitely do see communities reduce this expense for the utility as a means to alleviate the water rates. I think the bigger picture item, though, is understanding that interplay and making sure we're not penalizing on the other hand, which would cause some sort of other revenue increase that may be a burden, on constituents, regardless of the source.
Great, thank you. And my comments, Madam Chair, on this would just be kind of to recap with some of the information that this, the rate comprises a significant portion of the rate, and if we were to gradually phase this out, it would result in likely a significant rate reduction. And yes, through the typical process, no one was expecting it by midnight tonight, but whether that's 8 months through pursuing new rate opportunities, or it's a couple of years, it will no doubt reduce the rate significantly. A second point I think that's important, that this has nothing to do with water or with PFAS. I mean, as it's been brought up, it's about the interplay with the general fund and essentially piggybacking on our water revenue so the city can use it to kind of juice the general fund in kind of a slush fund manner. So I understand the sensitivity to have to offset if the city wanted to use it for other things, but another option would be to kind of strategically look at eliminating certain expenses. And then lastly, it's been talked about kind of what's the percentage in terms of the pilot share of rate revenue, and I think we were told in the last meeting that was around 18%. It sounds like tonight maybe 17%, 18, around that ballpark. And I don't know what the current stats look like, but the Journal Sentinel did publish the highest water utility pilot charges in Wisconsin from 2010 to 2019, and if we're at 18% with that time frame, that with the larger system essentially as a share of rate revenue puts us in the top 3 as being one of the highest. These are older stats, but Madison and Kenosha would be the others, and they were about at 18.5%. So, while I know we can't perhaps abruptly drop the pilot off or eject it, I think we do need to start looking for the sake of our residents and water consumers, particularly low-income, working class, and middle class. We need to figure out a way to get this baggage off of the water rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Denny.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't get to ask this in finance, but as it was mentioned, some of the other communities who do this, Mary Ann provided us a list of others, and Green Bay being my hometown, I went and looked at their water budget. It's interesting that they sell 4 times the amount of water we sell. They're the 3rd highest water producer in the state, and their rates are about 50%, and they're running, so it's a little more complicated, I guess, than just comparing cities to cities, but they're running about 10% to revenue. I think they've got a little over 2.36 million on 25 million in revenue sales. So they're able to get 10% at half the water rate. I think they're 2.8 per hundred, $2.81 per hundred, and we're about 5. I'd have to check for sure. 5.40, I think. But so it is a little more complex because of the added infrastructure we have. But I think it's pretty easy to see lower has got to be better, because we'll get rid of as Alder Killian referred to it as a tax, it's really a hidden tax. And I think whether we move it to the levy or we reduce taxes, moving it to the levy at least gives the visibility and the transparency where residents will see it, and they'll see it as a trade-off to the services. Are they acceptable? Are they not? I think that's just a more philosophically transparent way to manage it. Thank you.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Just a couple points. I think it's important to recognize in these situations that there are more water user customers than there are property taxpayers. So when we talk about shifting stuff to the levy, tax exempt water users get water bills. They do not get property tax bills. So when you make that shift, you do give a free pass to a lot of entities that use an awful lot of water that pay no taxes. I think also, we had a graphic up when we were looking at water rate comparisons, when we were first planning the construction of the new facilities. They were showing how we stacked up in terms of rates with other communities of similar size. And the statistic that came out of that is that age of facilities matters. And so the older the facilities are, the lower those water rates and the needs of the water utility tend to be, because they're not financing repairs and replacements of new facilities. And so when we set out on that study, and we had equipment that had lived way, way past its life, there were communities whose water rates were far and wide way above ours. And you could tell, based on looking at that chart that they had given us, which communities had recently replaced facilities, because when that happens, those rates take a jump, because you're taking on new debt, you're building new things, and as your stuff ages and becomes antiquated, you're not taking on that kind of debt, you're not building new things, and so that rate tends to atrophy a little bit. So the other thing I think that it's not appropriate to do is to let the public think that the general fund is some type of juiced up slush fund. The general fund pays for services that residents expect and appreciate: police, fire, road repairs, garbage, facilities, parks, snow plowing. It is not a fund that we use to have fun and do projects that people don't need or prioritize. So, just because there's an impact on the general fund, the idea that we can just slash $1.5 million off of that budget without significant cuts to amenities, facilities, staff, services, that is not realistic. So, when Brian talks to us from Ellers about the impact to the other side when you pull away this revenue, you either have to replace the revenue or reduce your expenses. But when you go to reduce those expenses, our experience in the past has been, if that requires cuts to staffing or public services, people go crazy over that. You will not stop the phone calls when you start to do even the most benign cuts. I hearken back to when we decided we were going to not mow in parks in certain areas. Oh my heavens. You can't imagine the public reaction to some of these things when you think it's a simple cut, and it's not. So, I think we have to be honest with people and manage their expectations that a new rate case may not yield an automatic 20% drop in their water bill, because other things get factored in there. So, I just think we have to be careful with letting people think that this is, an unnecessary charge and that it has no application to things that they expect of us. Thank you.
Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I like realistic assertions and kind of fact-based assertions. So let's just kind of get clear for the body and the public where some of these notions came from. And it was not the Alder of District 3. Who it was Professor Manuel Teodoro, Professor of Public Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's La Follette School of Public Affairs, who actually tends to have, from what I've read, abundant expertise in water and its relationship to management and finance, and those were his critiques laid out in the Journal Sentinel piece, and as far as I know, and he's probably about as good as it gets on certain issues, especially when we look at the social and community impacts. So, we talk about some people get a pass. It's not just about the pilot. So even a fee structure, the city had kind of neutralized the voice of the people in a referendum and had eliminated the need to have a referendum for new fees. The problem was identical. So when you have fees or things like this, essentially you are extracting more money from a lower income family as a percentage of their income than you are from others of a higher income. And as the author of the Journal Sentinel piece pointed out, that is a morally dubious way of funding the government. It should not occur. And also in terms of my slush fund statement, so here's the reality as I understand it. We're extracting revenue from our water. The city is in receipt of that revenue, and then it's using it for whatever it likes, essentially. So if that's not the definition of a slush fund, I don't know what is. And I didn't say it was fun, I just said it was the reality. So I think if we can make one improvement tonight, if it's not lowering this burden on our water consumers and residents, at least we can be clear to the public and residents that they are paying a significant sum additional to what they would have to if this was just about water. And it's not. This is funding things that the city wants to spend on, most of which have nothing to do with water. Thank you.
So what I heard is that we would like to continue this discussion as a policy body beyond tonight and maybe look out as we consider the next rate case. And I think this is an important discussion to continue having. Really, thank you, Brian, for explaining all of this to us. Marianne, did you have anything? You seemed like you might have something to share.
I was just going to clarify, as you're voting on this resolution, whether you like the 1.5 million or not, if the resolution does not pass, then we would use the PSC's calculated rate. So the pilot would go up, unless you offered an amendment to a different rate. So if it loses on the floor and we don't have an agreement, it would go up to the calculated rate, which when we calculated it last year was $2 million. I just wanted to to understand the impact of your vote.
Oh, all right. I have Alder Rasmussen, and then I heard there might be a request, but Alder Rasmussen.
Well, so just to clarify, so then our obligation is to either accept the 1.59 million and input that into our budget calculation, or be forced to take the PFC number, which is a larger burden on the utility even yet.
Yes.
Okay, so if we're concerned about the financial health of the utility, it should be clear what we need to do. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion to amend from Alder Killian. When does that show up?
I can,
Maybe you'd like to offer your motion to amend, and then we'll see if you can get a second.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam
Yeah.
Chair. I'd like to amend the amount to $0.
All right, we do have a motion to amend the resolution to $0. Is there a second? Looks like we have a second from Alder Larson. I'm going to wait so the clerk can type this in, and then we can continue having the discussion. Unless I'm good to start now. We discuss. All right. Oh. All right, we're ready to, oh. What just happened? Okay. It disappeared. All right, so we're talking about the amendment, so maybe if you'd like to, okay, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. So this amendment, let's just recount what we just heard in the Finance Committee and from Brian. This is a drastic sweeping measure that throws the entire budget and all of our departments into chaos and turmoil in the 11th hour of our budget process. So there's no immediate relief for water rate customers from any of this. The water bills stay the same, they go out the same, and people pay them the same. There is no PSC rate case under study right now. So there should be no reasonable way that we can pass this responsibly and then still pass a reasonable budget in time to get these tax bills out, which is why we're meeting tonight and not next week. So I see this as a chaos initiative, and I pray this gets voted down. Thank you.
Alder Denny.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would see a more reasonable deduction would be to take it over 15 years if our target is to get to zero. I don't know if we've established that, but over 15 years, it would be roughly take 100,000 off would be, say 1.49 million. And we'd start nibbling away at this and take a look at it again next year to see where we can go.
Any further discussion? Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, we've heard the kind of narrative about how this is a final hour tactic and it's meant to create chaos. If I'm not mistaken, I think I brought this up about 6 months ago, and maybe 4 months, certainly not at the final hour. The city was sluggish to pursue it, in my opinion, because essentially you're taking money away from it that it would like to spend, and it's just not really inclined to do that, it appears. But make no mistake, this was brought up a long time ago. It was based on fact and solid mathematics, and also the kind of rhetoric of there's no immediate rate decrease. Well, in the context of standard procedure, that's about as immediate as you get. So you know you have to go through the process, but unless we want to put a sign kind of at the door of City Hall, if you don't get relief tomorrow, you won't get relief at all, and that's what we do here, then we shouldn't look at it that way. Just because it would take 8 months, we should not tell the Wausau people that this could not bring relief. So not chaos in the final hour, but I think it's magnification of the absurdity of not pursuing tactics that could bring relief to our residents, especially low-income, working-class, and middle-class people. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this amendment? I don't see anyone with their hand raised, so right now we're voting on the amendment, and that is to amend the pilot payment to $0. Oh, Alder Denny, I see you've raised your hand now.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just clarify the procedure here? If we vote this down, it's eligible for another amendment.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
You may vote. Motion fails 8-3.
All right, so now we are back to the resolution as presented. Is there any discussion here? Looks like we have Alder Denny with an amendment, so why don't you let us know what that is, and then we'll see if we can get a second.
Okay, I would amend this to take 100,000 off so that we take the step in that direction, whether it's over 15 years or whether it's determined next year to go up or down, but 100,000 off the rate isn't going to break the city, and it isn't gloom and doom. So I would amend to make that payment 1.49 million.
Do I have a second? Looks like I have a second by Alder Killian. First, I'm going to call on Finance Director.
So is the topic of how the general fund will provide a balanced budget part of this conversation, or it's not? I was just curious.
I didn't hear anyone speaking to that, but I'm open to having that discussion.
Or whether we're going to increase the levy.
Okay. Is there anyone that wishes to speak? Alder Denny.
Well, clearly, we would have to do something, and in the next agenda item, we'll have that opportunity, I would think.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. The Finance Committee, at its last meeting and its meeting tonight, committed to a study of this exact issue early in 2024. We've talked with Brian about it from Ellers. We've talked about gathering some internal data in terms of operating expense from the plant, which is soon to be open for a year, so that we can make some informed decisions. This dartboard approach, where we just throw a dart and we go, well, I want to take off 1.5 million, well, I'm going to take off 100,000. All of that is not based in factual analysis. We need some time for the Finance Committee and the Water Commission, hand in hand, to analyze the effect and find a real strategy that makes sense. We don't do it here in some scattershot approach in the council chamber. And so the committee has committed to studying that. Mary Ann and Brian have both talked about providing data so that we can analyze and come up with a defined approach to try to step down the pilot payment in future years. But the proposed budget that we have produces holding the line on the pilot in terms of last year's amount. Thank you.
Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I find this to be almost comical because, as we're sitting here asking City Hall to take away this pilot program, reduce this pilot program, but we can't do that because our backs are against the wall. But yet, how many times has the City Hall come to us and said, you need to do this now with our backs against the wall because people had bypassed committees or just whatever. And this is why I find it comical, because now the shoe's on the other foot and it doesn't feel very good. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Alder Killian.
Thank you. Just to the point about we've crafted this, balanced budget scenario where we need offsets and so forth. I mean, Alder Denny just proposed $100,000. I think we could probably start in the next item eliminating positions that were never properly approved to begin with through the HR committee, and just by doing that, we might even have a surplus. So I look forward to that item, and we'll support this. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this topic? All right, so you are voting on an amendment to remove $100,000 from the pilot payment.
You may vote. Motion fails 8-3.
Okay, so now we are back to the resolution as presented. Alder Gisselman.
Yes, thank you. Just in the light of what came out of finance, an amendment that would direct the Water Commission Finance Committee to report back to the City Council, the first City Council meeting of April, a report on this so that we would have the rest of 2024 to plan and direct the budget. So I think we need some specific date of when this might happen. So my amendment would be direct Finance Committee as well as the Water Commission to report back to the City Council, the first City Council meeting in April of 2024.
Can I clarify? What do you want in the report?
The results of their study with regard to this issue. They said that they were ready to study the issue, and I think a timeline gives them a little bit of a timeline for them to work out the issue and report back to the City Council.
Okay, I just want to be clear because I got confirmation. When did we think that the report would be ready?
August.
August 1. Is that amenable, or do you need to?
Well, that's fine. I can certainly change it to August, but will that give us enough time in the light of preparing for the budget? Because
Yeah. We start the budget in maybe June-ish, so.
So then I will change my amendment to that first meeting,
Okay.
first City Council meeting in August.
Okay, all right.
Since we only have one in August anyways, that
We
will
can have
be
two
the-
if this body wants, that's
Well,
fine.
whatever. I
Okay.
know, granted,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Do
But,
I have a-
Just so that there's a deliberate study of this issue so that in the preparation for the 2025 budget, this City Council doesn't have to go through this again. I think that, and I would think that not only the immediate 2025 budget, but planning within a 5-year plan so that I would expect a comprehensive report back in August of 2024 with regard to how the City Council is going to approach this issue for the next 5 years.
Right, so
Thank you.
I have an amendment by Alder Gisselman. Is there a second? And we're typing it in quickly, so. Okay. Oop. We have, yep. Can you? Gisselman, yep. Okay, do I have a second? Alder Killian has seconded. Is there any discussion on this? Alder Denny.
Well, I would like to go back to the comment Alder Rasmussen made about the, I think it was in finance, about the opening meeting or with the new council in April, that we set the goal so that if we agree that we want to reduce it, I mean, we have to give them some guidance as to what kind of, how to bring the report back to us, don't you think?
All right, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I guess just to clarify the discussion that we had in finance, my comment was based on the new council's visioning. Whenever a new council is seated, it is important that whoever it chooses as its council president, and Becky's worked on this, I've worked on it in the past, that we get together as a group, determine what issues that new council wishes to work on, what impact it wishes to create during its 2-year term, pick out some priority items, and determine what that work looks like and what it will take within our committee structure to undertake that work. So if that new council decides that a reduction in the pilot payment or, a different process for any of it is something that they want to focus on, they would set those priorities for themselves, likely in parity with what they've heard from their districts and what exists in our strategic plan. But it's not specific to water rates, pilot payments, it's in general. If you want to address things like homelessness, transit, and water rates, those are your items. But as a group, that new council, whomever they are, will set those priorities for themselves. It isn't just about this. Thank you.
Alder Gisselman.
This amendment specifically prioritizes this issue from this city council. I mean, the new city council can determine what it wants to work on and what it does not want to work on. But this amendment specifically addresses the Finance Committee as well as the Water Commission to make some kind of formal report in August to the city council in August of 2024. It's not something that we're going to be picking out a priority in April, but this city council, I think, can direct at this point in time the Finance Committee as well as the Water Commission to direct its work towards that August meeting. I don't think it's a matter of setting another type of priority in April. This city council setting that priority with this amendment. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? I'm not seeing any. So what we are voting on is an amendment to prepare a report on us after studying the pilot payment and probably looking at the various options to be presented to this council in August of 2024. Yeah, I think that's good. All right.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
Look at us with a unanimous amendment. All right, so here we are with our resolution as amended that includes the report expectation in August. We're back at it. Is there any final discussion we'd like to have? Okay, I think we can vote on this one.
You may vote. Passes 8-3.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have file number 231109. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee adopting the 2024 City of Wausau budget and general property tax to support the same. I have a motion by Alder Rasmussen and a second by Alder Lukens. Is there any discussion? Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. On behalf of the Finance Committee, first I want to thank them and thank the staff for their work on the 2024 budget. As is our normal process, our budget process began in July with CIP meetings where we analyzed and ranked capital spending. We then, as part of our budget workshops in October, ranked supplemental requests from within the departments to meet new needs, both for equipment, facilities, and staffing. The budget that we've come forward with is a result of the committee's vetting and approximately 5 open meetings, which obviously the public and all of us are invited to attend and participate in. It increases the budget for street and road repair. It achieves capital improvements that were prioritized by CIP. That committee also includes citizen members, which is important. It retains our staff. It protects services and facilities that taxpayers expect to have operating. So with that, we started out with a much, much higher mill rate increase, and through the denial of some capital and supplements, and through strategic hiring as far as start dates, and project savings, we have whittled that down considerably. So while there is still a mill rate increase for 2024, the cost of doing everything we do here isn't going down. And so this really preserves all of those services and gets us where we need to go. And at least in the street and road realm, that is something that residents have continued to ask us to prioritize. And our engineering department has heard that, and their budget does include an increase for both hot mix and asphalt overlay. So I feel like this budget is quality work that was put together by the Finance Committee, and I'm hoping that we will pass it. Thank you.
Thanks. Alder Gisselman.
Thank you. I noticed that no comments tonight with regard to the budget from citizens, none at the public hearing. I think that the city council should be taken as a goal, perhaps, to invite, encourage, and for our citizens to speak to the priorities of the city of Wausau. The budget is always the biggest event, really, in the light of the year. It sets our priorities, it sets our goals for next year, and I think that we have to become more I know that we have to become more diligent in presenting the budget, presenting the priorities, goals, the needs of the city of Wausau to the citizens of the city. And I think that either the city council, finance committee should take it upon itself to engage the citizens so that there is some response, so there is some ideas, so there is some thoughts coming from the citizens with regard to how the city should move. Big projects coming in front of the city include solar arrays. I mean, we have a lot of different priorities, a lot of different needs in the city. The Transit Commission, moving the Transit Commission, you know, what are some of the needs? Where does the people feel we should be setting our goals and our budget on? And I would like perhaps just to start with the Finance Committee with regard to how to engage the citizens even earlier into the budget process, so that we get a good feeling of what's on the minds of the citizens of the city of Wausau. Thank you.
Thanks. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been, I don't know how to put this, but there was 2 HR positions that were added to the budget that were kind of canceled or tabled at the last minute. And it is my understanding that the funding for this position is still in the budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, it passed
these
with the
two?
Finance Committee.
So I would like to amend the budget that these funds be taken out, because to me, it's like having money in there for citizens to repair roads that don't exist. I mean, how can you place money for positions that haven't been okayed? So with that, I'd like to make that amendment that those funds for those positions be removed from the budget.
Okay, there's an amendment. Did you push your button to amend? Oh, don't do it, actually. I'm being told not to do it. Cody can do it. Okay, the amendment is to remove. Do we need to have a dollar amount? Remove funding for 2 positions that have not yet been
created.
approved by HR.
That amount was $80,056.
So 80,056.
Yes. The Police position was 63,383, and the community development position was 16,673, because it was a part-time and it was funded by other resources.
All right, we're typing it in. You got it in? Okay, so we have, we have the amendment request by Alder Larson and the second by Alder Killian. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. So what's in the budget right now for those positions is placeholder funding. So the Finance Committee requested that all new hires not be allowed to start until April 1st to save a percentage of the levy impact for the wages for those positions. That gives the HR Committee approximately 5 months to do anything it needs to or wants to do surrounding those positions. Obviously, that money doesn't get spent until the people get hired. If you don't approve the placeholder funding, at the time that those positions are approved and those folks are ready to be hired, you're going to have to go back and do a budget mod amendment, and everyone complains about doing that in the first quarter. So that said, in past budget processes, the way we have worked staff additions is if you are hiring additional staff into existing job classifications, which these two positions are admins, they're clerical staff. One is shared between police and fire. There's no backup for the current admin person at the fire department. If something happens with her, there is no one to work down there, and the police department is months behind in open records request servicing. So that position was asked for that reason. The other one, the admin in community development, they need clerical help. And we pared that position down to half-time. They requested a full-time person. So the positions make sense. They're existing job classifications. If the HR committee, though, wants to articulate changes to the specific job duties, which I think really is the job of the department heads who are going to be supervising them and creating the work for them, that committee has 5 months to get its work done. And so the placeholder funding obviously isn't getting spent. If for some reason those positions don't get created, that money goes back in the budget. So I think the safe thing for us to do is to hold those earmarks so that the departments can move forward with the hiring when the HR committee has finished whatever it chooses to do. Thank you.
Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Your mic isn't on.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but it's not due process. And that's what we're trying to get back to here is due process. And due process is when these positions come from HR, they go to the committee, they go to council, they get passed, and then they do budget modifications. You don't just put positions in the budget without going through due process. And then, if it's like I said, you're putting money, it's like telling your citizens you're putting money for streets, aside for streets that don't exist. Thank you.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'm here to tell you that's not how it's been done. When we hired the second assistant city attorney into the legal office in the realm of succession planning for the two that we had that were contemplating retirement, that was done through a budget request, and it was a supplement and it was a CIP. So that is not the case. When you're trying to create a totally new job class that doesn't exist today, where it's a job that no one here is doing, it's uncharted territory, and you have to write up the job description and study what the pay scale should be, that's when you begin in HR. When we created things like the EMS supervisor in the fire department that didn't exist before, the training director, things that they didn't have, that's where you begin in HR, and then you come to finance for money. Administrative classes are clerical people. Admin 1, 2, and 3 exist in every department we have, and they are a standard clerical employee. In fact, they can be shared between departments because their skill sets are largely similar. This is not what we're talking about here. These are not new, they're not new duties. They're clerical duties. They exist today. They just need more people doing them. Thank you.
Okay, I have two people on council who have requested to speak, but I also recognize we have some folks, department heads who'd like to speak, but I'll start with you, Alder McElhaney.
Because there are admins in in this area does not mean they're open positions. I don't understand that thinking. Open positions in HR means that there is a position that has been created and there is a job description that it has been looked at by our professional HR director and approved. He does a reclassification, he does a classification of the employee and everything. The ED has admin, they came in looking for an admin with an associate's degree, which our other admins don't have, 5 years experience, which our other admins don't have, and it's an admin 2. That doesn't mesh with what we have. So there is an issue. And I was willing to go the way, I stood up for our HR director, who's been missed in this entire process, and I don't care if it's been done before, it's wrong. We have a process, and we have hired a professional, educated person, and we did a national search to bring him in to make sure that HR laws are protected. We have a responsibility in HR to make sure there's equity and everybody feels equal in this city. Finance is not charged with that, HR is. And you missed the HR committee. Handbook items were asked to be signed without looking through it. I'm hearing from my HR director, I'm being missed. That's upsetting to me because there are laws. We can't just start going willy-nilly and then somebody goes, and believe me, I get the calls from staff. Well, why is this person an admin 2, but then they're making more than me? And why is this person, and admins is the big problem. I have had department heads come to me over the 8 years I've been on HR and say, admins in the front by Mary Ann are making more money and they don't do as much. This is sincerely the talk I have from people, and it is a constant rumble through HR. So no, I don't believe if it's been done before, I don't believe it was good process. And I don't believe it is good process now. And believe me, if the department heads knew they wanted this, they know where he works. They know to get through to him. And I will stand up for him every time. He was bypassed. Nobody went to him. And so I don't understand. I asked him, are these positions, because I got an email back, these positions are open positions. I asked him, are these open positions? No, they are not. So the HR committee will do this. I will vote for this amendment because that's how ticked I am, that this continues to talk about how we're going to bypass regular order and bypass HR, because I don't understand it, and I don't like we've always done it this way. And I heard that, something about the other comment about the assistant district or assistant attorney. I checked with the attorney's office, and they said that had gone through classification with HR before coming to supplemental. Thank you.
Alder Denny.
No, thank you, Mayor. And I did watch and I'm part of the Finance Committee, and I do trust the department heads to bring us their needs, and I felt they made some good cases there. But it appears, though, that we have done it this way before, and I would agree with Alder McElhaney, that doesn't make it right. And then watching the HR committee meeting, there were 3 alders that were either in some state of confusion or disappointment that the process didn't take the path that they expected it to, even though I don't know that we ever did it that way before. So maybe now is the time to take a step back and get it right. And I would support getting it right before we, conditionally accept something that we're going to have to fix on the fly.
Alder Martins.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, thank you. Well, let's talk about cutting off our nose in spite of our face here. These 2 administrative positions were brought to us as supplemental budget requests because of a genuine need within the departments. And I think, when we go through the budgetary process, we look at the capital, the capital improvement spending or the planning. We look at the supplemental requests, and there's a lot of stuff that gets juggled around in the process, and especially with the supplemental requests, because it comes so late in the process, it sometimes doesn't hit all of the committees in the order it needs to be done. But and when we looked at the supplemental requests, we had the realization that there are some classification issues here with these administrative positions, but we think that the positions are that important that we want to earmark the funding in the budget because they are necessary for the operation of the departments. By eliminating these items from the budget, what we are going to do is set us up in February to do budget modifications and then scramble to figure out how we are going to fund these positions. And with that, I think maybe we should take a moment. We can listen to the chiefs, police and fire chief, and then also the ED director on what the importance is of these positions and why we need to approve these positions, why this amendment needs to fail.
Okay, I would welcome our directors and chiefs to.
Just have a few comments because I believe there's a misunderstanding from some alderpersons. There's nothing nefarious on department heads trying to usurp a system to get positions. I knew full well that the time would come that we would have to go in front of the HR committee. But I can also tell you that I've been doing this long enough and coming here long enough that if someone said to me, "What's the order?" I have no idea. I just know that I have to go through HR committee, I have to go through finance committee in either order, because you got to get through both, and then you have to get through the full council. And that is the way it's been done as long as I can recall, or I've been involved in standing here and requesting different positions. And so the idea that staff get documents sent to us from finance because it's budget season and it's supplemental budget requests, and we call Mary Ann and we're like, "Is this supplemental?" And Mary Ann will say, "Nope, that's supplemental." And so fill out the form, send it through the appropriate channels. And new positions are supplemental. So through my lens, this is a chicken and egg thing, like which one comes first? And if this council or future councils have an order in which they would like us to go through future requests for positions or different things, that things change throughout the year and we need to come and ask for things, if there's an order in which you want us to go through, I would ask you respectfully, please, an email that says, here's the order in which we want you to go through, that you guys decide how you want that to happen, because you have a whole bunch of department heads that have no idea and there's nobody to call and ask. And then we reach a point in which our reputations are being questioned as a result of us trying to usurp the system. This system is very complicated and we have a lot going on, and what occurred here this year is what has occurred as long as I can remember. And everyone knew that HR was going to be involved in this, but if we don't protect the money and the financing to be able to have those positions, asking HR to approve a position that there aren't dollars for also doesn't make sense. And if the finance committee said, no, that's not going to happen in this budget, then it also doesn't need to go to HR because there's no point in that. So that's my position. I feel like we did the best we could to serve these citizens and you as a council. And I take minor offense if somebody believes that we're trying to mess with the system here or usurp this council. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, very well said, Matt, and I agree everything that Chief Barnes just said. And I want to add, this isn't the first time we brought both of these positions we brought forward in previous supplemental requests. They didn't make it through to the budget. They were denied. At no point did I hear as a director, Bob, this is the route we want to see you go as you request this in a future year. And so I'm trying to follow a process as I understand it. We don't have a handbook for directors that say when you request this is how we go through it. And yet we're being thrown into it like we're we're trying to circumvent the proper system. We're not. There's even some confusion here in the council. I'll tell you, the positions are needed. They're really needed by us. The one catalyst for change is we have a new HR director that's been with us almost a year now, and I'll tell you, he's outstanding. We've got a level of professionalism in the HR department that we haven't had previously. And so when this came around, hey, we're gonna pump the brakes. We're gonna postpone these positions till April. We're gonna send it back to HR to fund the process. I'm all for it. This is the right process. But to eliminate the money means that now we're gonna have this problem inside the department for at least another year. And then I'm gonna have to, or I go the budget mod, we're gonna, that route, where I'm requesting it in February. I'm gonna, ask you to leave this money in there. Let us follow the process. And don't hang it on us if the process isn't clearly understood, because it's obviously not clearly understood by this entire body. So, thank you.
And I would just like to add, too, as we kicked off the budget, I met with the mayor and the HR director together to inquire about, CPI increases for staff, insurance, things like that. No one ever mentioned that they wanted to change the process, that they felt we had position creation out of order. And so, again, it wasn't my intention to do something that offended anyone or was changing processes. I never received feedback from anyone that we were to change the order of how we handled supplemental requests and new positions.
I largely want to just echo what everyone has said so far in terms of the process having not been clear. This is my third year submitting for this position, and I've followed the same procedure for the last 3 years, which is a supplemental request. And it has never in those 3 submissions been told to me that I have to go to HR first. I had been talking with the HR director as soon as the budgets came up, and supplemental requests basically came to the forefront, because he knew that we had been looking for an admin position for quite a while. And so we worked on, what this could look like. The request that I submitted was based off of our previous admin in our department, which was an admin 3 and had higher educational requirements, and I had asked for review of that, and I think there was just not enough time. There was some missed CCing on emails and things like that. So, if there is a process that this committee or this council would like us to follow, we are happy to do that. But to everyone's point so far, to both chiefs and Finance Director Grote, we have been following the process that we knew to be the case. And so if that is to be different, we would love to know that and follow that procedure going forward. But as of this point, it does make the most sense for all of us to keep the money in the budget, bookmark it, because otherwise we are a year out with all of these other things. And, every one of us has a need for these positions, which is why we requested them.
Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not saying I don't know if the positions are needed or not. That's for our HR director to figure out. That's why we hired him. And I don't know why he got bypassed through this whole situation. But as per what Alder Martin said, do we need these positions? Nobody's eliminating anything because nothing's there to eliminate yet. If you need to take the money out of the budget, take the money out of the budget and set it aside for if you need it later. But to place money for positions that aren't there is just not the way we do things. I'm sorry, and thank you.
Alder McElhaney.
To give that the HR committee, the HR director is working on these positions currently. He will be bringing them back. I know one item is bringing back in December. I don't know, it will be coming back. So I want everyone to know that we did not deny these positions. We just decided to give our HR director time. Information was thrown to him within days, because he was forwarding them to me, before the HR committee, there was no time. There was no time for him to do his due diligence, and I respect that he needs to do his due diligence. My upsettedness is not with staff or whatever, but when I keep hearing that these are open positions, that is where I have a difficulty, because they're truly not open positions through an HR lens, is that there are positions that have been open and posted. That is, I think it's semantics, but it is truly not true in an HR lens. Could there be a new admin for the police department? Yes. Could there be another admin there? Yes. Was there one years ago? Yes, but Mr. Schock got rid of that one to make a manager. So it's not like they left and that was an open position, correct? So that is what I'm talking about, and I just think semantics do matter, and process does matter. I field a lot of calls from council members, and they're feeling that processes are kind of skewed right now, and I think it does matter in that we need, anytime we're adding money to the budget, be it 80,000 or 8,000 or 800,000, it has an effect on our taxpayers. And so they expect us to be very diligent and do our fiduciary duty to make sure everything is done correctly. I hope that in the future, in future budgets or whatever, we have a process so everyone knows it. And I think that the HR director will have his discussions with other department heads, and he will come up with some type of a, or collaboratively come up with a process. But the reason that we slowed this roll was that the information really was not given to him by some people until 2 days before the HR committee. We tried, we put it on the HR agenda at the last moment, and he just told me I can't get it done in a manner that I want to get it done. So we slowed the roll. I did the motion to table until he comes back. He is not stopping. He's not stopping these positions, but he will come back with a classification and a job description that actually mirrors what else is happening within the city. And I know that I have been in HR a long time, since I've been on council, and it is a freaky type of department compared to other departments because of the separate laws. It isn't just council directing HR. It is the federal government and the state government and all of these laws and equity. And I get the calls from other employees that watch this and see this, and they get ticked. And I'm not going to tell you who, but I get a lot of them. Why is this person getting this? Why is this admin paid more? Why doesn't this admin have to do what I do? So these are the questions we have to answer in HR. I don't know what the right answer is, but I hope, Mayor, that we can get a process together that is open, transparent, and uses our HR director as he needs to be. Thank you.
Just to respond to the direct comment to me, I have no problem in articulating what that process is. That's the process this body wants. So I'd hope that this body would be engaged in articulating what that process is. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and yes, I'd echo Alder McElhaney's and Alder Larson's comments about process, and just because it was brought up, I think it needs to be clear, at least from District 3, certainly there was no suggestion of nefariousness or anything like that, and I think if we're to look at, words that start with P, it's not about people or personalities, but process, and many of these problems precede all three of you by years or decades often that we deal with here, and it's been a long-standing culture sometimes. So, but I do feel like what's been brought up about the need for clarification is very important, and as soon as that can be put together to make sure that staff has that, so they do have a roadmap for the process, and it sounds like that's going to be a possibility. So I do, we've just run up against procedural issues quite frequently, regularly. One of them had to do with property, whether it's owned or going to be purchased by the city. We just had a long discussion and deliberation on that. I think process has come to the surface lately as something that's important, so I will support this. But I do have just one question for Ms. Brodick about this position or some of the associated funding that was talked about in finance, because you had brought up kind of translation and interpretation for neighborhood meetings or other meetings even. I think that's a positive step forward on the communications front. I just wondered, because I've asked before and it seems like it's going to be something that will be of use at some point. Metro Ride kind of had one in its plan. Does community development have a language access plan somewhere?
In terms of like a technology, no. We have what we're doing right now. We are employing interpreters in the community, Spanish and Hmong interpreters, to do flyer interpretation and then be at community meetings for us. So that's our plan as of right now.
And I think that work is very positive. I guess on the plan side, I was just wondering, kind of, is there a document that says, in a situation like this, or with a threshold of residents in a given scenario where may not be English dominant, I mean, is there anything that kind of sets up kind of thresholds or guidelines on how we respond to language needs?
Not at this point. What we're doing at this point is just planning on having Spanish and Hmong interpreters at all of the community listening sessions that we host. The entire idea is that we would remove as many barriers to access as possible. So that would be for everyone, not just neighborhood dependent.
Well, I like the universality of it. Thank you for that information.
Okay. Alder Denny.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't intend to bring this issue up tonight or this year, but I did draft an email to the mayor and to HR committee chair regarding the administrator. Maybe the HR director could put this job description together and add this as a duty for the administrator if we get to talking about that someday.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I know that there's folks that watch on TV that need to hear certain people say certain things, and that administrator discussion flows right down that line. And I will say, and I will continue to say until the end of time, that if this community is to be asked to change its form of government, that needs to happen in a referendum where everyone can weigh in the voting booth. End of story. We are not going to, in the 11th hour in our budget process, send our HR down a rabbit hole to create a position that the community has told us before it doesn't want. So take that for what it is, but that really is out of place.
Point of order.
Out of place. I have the floor.
Point of order. We're discussing an amendment here. We're not discussing.
We are discussing the amendment, and the amendment is that we need to keep.
We're not discussing administrator position. We're discussing the money issue here.
All right.
For the budget.
He's out of order.
All right. Let's continue on the amendment.
So, the amendment to remove the funding takes away the ability to properly post and hire that job in a timely manner. So at the end of the day, we need to keep that funding in the budget. HR will have 5 months to do anything it needs to do with the job description and the salary ranges, and then when they've completed their work, they can post the job and hire the people. Nobody is getting hired until April. But we cannot pull the rug out from under the funding. The police chief was right about the chicken and egg conundrum. If HR approves a position and finance obstructs the money, there is no position. So if we approve the funding, we have the funding in the budget, they can move forward, and the process is actually smoother. It comes in paid for. That makes sense. Because when you go to the HR committee first, question number one that committee asks you if you're a department head is, how are you going to pay for this? And you had best come in with some kind of a plan with either donations, grants, or project savings to cover it, Because when it's levy dependent, almost always the answer gets to be no. Things are difficult. So I think we need to move forward and keep the funding in. Thank you.
Alder Lukens.
Thank you, Mayor. Since Alder Dinney brought this up, as part of this amendment discussion, I am also going to just second the fact that now I've heard about the city administrator being brought up in a number of different meetings, and it has been explained over and over what the process is. And I would appreciate if you would stop bringing that up. Thank you.
Alder Martins.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I would just hope you would instruct my colleagues that the comments are to be directed to the chair. And also, as a matter of procedure, Alder Larson had called for a point of order earlier, and I think just by rules that's typically responded to. I may have missed the response, but
Maybe you didn't hear me because my voice is a little weak tonight.
that's possible,
Thanks.
Madam Chair. Thank you.
Alder Martins.
Okay, thank you. You know, I think I should just reiterate, you know, what's going on, what's happening, and what we're gonna lose if this amendment goes through. You know, the funding, we've got in the proposed budget, we've got the funding in place for these staff positions. These positions, the job descriptions are going through HR as we speak. HR didn't have time before the budget, finalizing the budget, in order to have those positions ready to go, so they needed more, the committee and the director needed more time in order to hammer out those details. But the funding can still be in place for when those job descriptions are ready, those position descriptions are ready to be posted come next year. What are the positions? Well, in the administrative assistant in police and fire is a shared responsibility, 60% in police, 40% in fire. Their job in the police department will be to fulfill open records requests that have come in an enormous amount of record requests are hitting the police department for whatever reason. Some of it, well, you know, some of it is probably well-meaning and good. Some of it is kind of, you know, do we really need to fulfill these? But you have to. The law says that those requests, they cannot judge if it's a good request or it's a bad request. We need to fulfill those requests. And there is a backlog of months in order to fulfill those requests. And if this position is not created to do that, then we might be in some sort of other legal jeopardy down the road. The fire department they've got one administrative person on staff. If that person is gone, if something happens, there's nobody there to take up the slack. They need that extra resource in the fire department, and that's why, and the shared position is a perfect opportunity for both these departments. Economic development. A lot of times the lights are out when ED staff are out doing their jobs, and there's nobody there to answer the phone, to help with citizen requests. So the creation of that position will help in that regard. One of the other items in the budget is earmarking $10,000 for public listening sessions around the city, and along with providing services like translation services. If this position is not funded, those listening sessions will not happen. So removing this funding does not fix any of the procedural issues that council members are having in the order in which items pass through committee. What it is doing is it's hindering the city's ability to provide customer service to the citizens of the city of Wausau. That's why I believe that this amendment must fail today.
Alder Luke, excuse me, Alder Lukens.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree, having listened to the, having read the supplemental budget requests and listening to the presentations, the combined police and fire proposed position is directly a result, as far as the police department portion of it, of the records requests, and that relates directly to the public who are, upset if they're not going to be getting their requests on time. And for the fire department, it's crucial. And for ED, I agree. We know that there's a tremendous amount of pressure and comments from the public as to the development that is needed in the city and the revenue from that. So I also would vote against this amendment. And I also apologize, Mayor and my colleagues, for not directing my comment to the mayor before. I just, as a matter of integrity on this council, do not believe that this platform should be used for campaigning. Thank you.
Alder McElhaney.
Thank you. This is probably off center, but we have other members of our community that speak other than Hmong and Spanish, so maybe you and I should speak. We are getting a very large community of refugees. I can help you with that, but they are members of our community. They're paying rent. They're working. They should be recognized as well. And I just hope that we can accommodate everyone if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, and to Alder McElhaney's point and Ms. Broderick's earlier comments, it might, I know it's a tough path to get some of these things going, but it might help to, at some point, have a framework where certain things, if the situation requires, can be accommodated. But thank you for the efforts you've made, but I think a plan would be helpful at some point. Thank you.
Chief.
Just so everyone's aware, and this is true for every alder person as well, as you're trying to deal with a constituent, the police department holds the contract with Boost Lingo. You push a button, you type in what language you want, and generally speaking, in under 30 seconds, you have a live interpreter on the phone. You can either do it via video with your phone, so you can both see the interpreter, or be done with voice. So should any department, it's available to the whole city, or should any elected official that needs to speak with a constituent, just reach out to me. I can get you access to that.
Thank you. I have that on my phone, thanks to you. All right, I don't see any more requests to speak, so the amendment right now that we have been discussing is to remove $80,056 from the budget for the 2 administrative positions. So that's what you're voting on. A vote yes would remove the funding, a vote no would leave the funding as is. We are ready.
You may vote. Motion failed 6-5.
All right, so we are back to the budget as presented. Is there any discussion? Alder Dinney.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I think it's important to review, maybe take us back to last year when the city attorney ruled on the germane nature of that discussion that I amended last year with regard to an administrator. I did not make that amendment tonight. I was very clear that the advice and the desire given to me from the mayor and from the from the finance director was that this is an item that should be started at the HR level, at the HR committee or at the HR department. So I'm taking that advice. I drafted an email. I apologize it hasn't gotten to you yet, but that is a method potentially to solve this issue we had here tonight. It is germane. And it is not a campaign, and I take offense to that. For the last 6 months, there has only been one declared candidate here, so let's.
Is this point of order?
What do you think?
This isn't regarding the budget.
Let's talk about the budget.
What's on
If we
the-
can stick
the
to
agenda.
budget,
Thank
I think
you.
that'd be good.
Thank you. This was in response to an accusation, and I'll leave it to the parliamentarian to sort through after the meeting, but I feel that was out of order. And what I talked about was completely germane to the topic at hand. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the budget? All right. It seems that we're ready. Oh, Alder McElhaney.
I would like the finance director to go through the budget publicly about what the mill rate, that kind of thing, just a quick sentence or two, that would be great, thank you.
Sure. I think she's well equipped to do such a thing.
So as articulated in the resolution, the levy for operations is $31,002,099. The total levy, because we then use that base levy for the tax increment calculation, becomes $36,509,046 $466.39. The tax rate will be based on that. The assessed tax rate will be $10.86 compared to last year when it was $10.60. So about a 26-cent increase or 2.47%. We are just one component of the tax rate, and so there's impact to the individual property owner based on a combined tax rate that includes the technical college, the county, and the school district, as well as other factors such as the school credit. So that is not the only change that a taxpayer will see.
All right. Any further questions, comments, needs before we get this vote on? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
You may vote. Passes 8-3.
All right, thank you, everyone. We have a budget. All right. Next up, we have file number 231110. This is a preliminary resolution from our Capital Improvement and Street Maintenance Committee levying special assessments for the 2024 street construction projects. It looks like I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Henke. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any.
You may vote. Passes 11-0.
All right, thank you. Next up, I guess we are requesting to suspend the rules, 6B for filing and 12A referral of resolutions. This does require a 2/3 vote. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Rasmussen. You don't get to talk.
You may vote. Passes 11-0.
All right, the rules are suspended. So first up, we have file number 220105. It's a resolution from the Economic Development Committee approving the First Amendment to the SCS Wausau, AKA SC Swiderski River Life Development Agreement. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. I believe this passed unanimously at committee. Oh, it was 4-1. Okay, almost. Oh, yeah, I remember now. Any discussion here? Okay.
You may vote. Passes 8-3.
All right. Next up, we have file number 231111. This is a resolution from Finance Committee approving nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement on new highway right-of-way fee and landscaping at 7255 Stewart Avenue, Parcel 1, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Lukens. Did these pass unanimously?
Yes.
Yes, these all have passed unanimously on committee. Any discussion here? I'm not seeing any.
You may vote. Passes 11-0.
All right, next up is file number 231112. It's a resolution from Finance Committee approving nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement at 7019 Stewart Avenue, parcel 12, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion from Alder Watson and a second by Alder Lukens. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you. I feel like you have all of these on here, so I get to keep talking all night. We are now on to file number 231113. This is a resolution from Finance Committee approving nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement at 5450 Stewart Avenue, parcel 41, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Hertz. Is there any discussion? I don't see any.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, we are on to file number 231114. This is a resolution from Finance Committee approving nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement at 5400 Stewart Avenue, parcel 42, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. Is there any discussion? All right.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, next up, file number 231115. This is a resolution from Finance Committee approving a nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement at 5300 Stewart Avenue, parcel 43, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion by Alder Lukens and a second by Alder Watson. Is there any discussion? I don't see any.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, next up, we have file number 231116. This is a resolution from Finance Committee approving nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement and new highway right-of-way fee at 5050 Stewart Avenue, parcel 44, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you. Next up is file number 231117. Another resolution from the Finance Committee approving a nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement and new highway right-of-way fee at 5000 Stewart Avenue, parcel 47, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Lukens. Is there any discussion? I don't see any.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, next up is file number 231118, a resolution from Finance Committee approving a nominal payment parcel for a temporary limited easement and new highway right-of-way fee at 4900 Stewart Avenue, parcel 48, Transportation Project Plat 6999-09-02. I have a motion by Alder Lukens and a second by Alder Herbst. Is there any discussion? All right, I don't see any.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, next up is file number 231119. This is a resolution approving an agreement with FAA for transfer of entitlements, a portion to Wausau Downtown Airport. I have a motion by Alder Dinney and a second by Alder Lukens, but I'm going to toss it over to the city attorney just to give us a little brief spiel on this.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't even have the resolution in my packet, but John Schmiel would have been here this evening. He had something come up, and I told him that I would cover for him. So he was more than willing to be here, and some of you are on airport. You understand this process. It is a federal agreement, so I would consider it an intergovernmental agreement that we are being required to sign, which by our procurement policy requires council approval. and it requires the mayor's signature and my signature under penalty of perjury that I have the authority to authorize the transfer of $150,000 in funds back to the federal government. And I felt that for both of those reasons, it needed council approval. So that's why we asked you to suspend the rules and get this through, because the grant expired, I believe, on September 30th. And this was brought to my attention mid-November. So I've been spending time talking to a gentleman at the DOT, Bureau of a BOA, and he explained to me this is the 2019 grant, the block grant, and he said every year it's Wisconsin's policy to take all the available grant funding. I don't know if it made the packet, was the contract in there? Okay, good, because I put that in there so that you could see it. You can see Wausau's downtown airport got $150,000 along with 76 other Wisconsin airports. Starting in 2022, they can no longer obtain available block grant funding, but it's obtained based on planned need by various airports across Wisconsin. If an airport does not have a project or need the additional funding for an existing project, we defer that entitlement to a future block grant, leaving the funding at the FAA. The airport is only temporarily out of the funding. It is only available to obtain annually, but if we defer for 1 year and transfer these funds back, we can obtain twice the funding the following year. So the BOA approves the $150,000 use per projects approved at each airport through CIP and planning. Becker Hoppy helps us with those projects, and I understand it was through both this Mark at DOT, and John told me it was through no fault of local staff or managers. It was just a complicated terminal renovation project that required numerous points to be worked out or details to be worked out with the engineers, and it didn't make it to the ability to carry the project out. And it being beyond the 3 years now, we need to return that $150,000 to the feds, and it will be used at the Waukesha Airport. Like I said, though, John even told me that you can forego funding for up to 3 years, or you can hold up to 3 years and then it doubles and then triples the third year. So it's good to know that it doesn't sit there. It gets used by the airports that are ready to go on their projects, and that doesn't mean we wouldn't get it in the future if our project is ready and another airport can't use theirs. They will defer funding back to the BOA as well, and we can apply for it when we're ready with the funding. So it's not necessarily lost permanently. It's just we weren't able to use it by the deadline this year, so we're seeking your approval to authorize that return to the federal government for this year's funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I think it's important to recognize, and I think Ann alluded to it a little bit, that the slowness and the spend down on this particular grant is not the fault of the local airport management or the engineer or the architect at Becker Hoppy. What we have experienced and what we've been hearing on the airport committee consistently is that in the last 3 years, there has been a significant slowdown both at the Bureau of Aeronautics and at the FAA in decision-making and plan approvals. And so that, I guess I won't call it foot dragging, it's a bottleneck of minutia where they have a volume of new staff. Their decision-making authority is not what it once was. The number of steps in a process are way more cumbersome than they used to be, and that has caused this delay. But it absolutely did not happen with our team. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple on this. So it had, the time period had expired in September, and this was brought to the city attorney's attention in November. If I may ask about the process and kind of how the events unfolded, how was that brought to Ms. Jacobson's attention? And is it just standard that there would be kind of a lag time in between the expiration and notification to your office or whoever the responsible or overseeing department is?
I don't know if that would be standard, but it came to my attention when John called me directly and said, "Oh, I've got a piece of paper I need you to sign. Just sign it and get it back to me." And I read it and I said, "Whoa, what is this?" And I had to look into it a little further, and I communicated with the gentleman at the BOA who said most cities have called him and demanded answers to the same questions I asked before they would agree, and many of them do require resolutions to authorize the return of the unused funding. So he wasn't at all surprised. Both he and John were very helpful in providing me information about, like Lisa described, how this whole process works, and what she said was accurate as well. So that's how it rolled out.
Great to hear, thank you. And are we confident now that we don't have other scenarios or funds hanging out there that may be somewhat unaccounted for after expiration date? Do we have a process kind of in place to account for these funds and viable time?
I don't know how to answer that because I don't know what I don't know. So as people come forward and ask, I just try to do my best in investigating it and sorting out what I think the appropriate process is. So I explained my reason for bringing it here tonight.
Fair enough, and thank you. It's been helpful to get the information. And the last thing, and it sounds like I know the answer, and it sounds positive, but this doesn't affect our standing in any way. In fact, it sounds like a magic money machine where you give it back and you get 2 or 3 times the amount. So maybe if we can figure that out.
Well, you can accumulate it up to 3 years, right?
Yes.
So if you could have, $450,000 ready to go for a project that's ready, but and Lisa was correct. John did tell me that, it isn't so much foot dragging, but it does take a long time for the wheels to turn and the approvals to come. So, I think it's good that it just doesn't sit there or not get used. So it's good that they keep recycling it every year to keep moving the projects that are needed forward around the state. I think that's positive.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. The magic money machine with the entitlement funding is fantastic, and we historically have not had a problem with spend down. The airport maintains a 5-year capital plan, and we often will shift those projects in order to meet the funding that we have or the approvals that we can get so that we can maximize the amount of BOA and FAA funding. Most of their projects are funded either 80-20 or 90-10. And so for us to be able to secure that for big things like lighting and runways and terminal improvements is key. And so the airport committee is constantly getting reports as to the status of those projects and the planning. And at each meeting, we have the engineer present, and he gives an update on those projects, including the bureau approvals, which they have been incredibly frustrated with in many airports statewide, not just ours. They're having the same hurdles everywhere they go. Thank you.
I'll just add, it's incredible that of the many years they've received this funding, this is the first year they have not used the full entitlement for the year. So that's pretty remarkable as well.
All right. I'm not seeing any more requests to speak, so I think we're ready to vote on this.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, last up, we have public comment and suggestions. If there's anyone in the public that has something to say, you're welcome. I guess I have one thing to say, and that's Happy Thanksgiving. I would entertain the last item, motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Henke. All in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
You gotta wave and get all the buttons.
I did. I hit the wrong button earlier. And I just hurt somebody real bad.
Yeah, I drove my 50 today. I don't know if it's real.